The first ever parliamentary impeachment inquiry against a public protector, this is Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, is now underway, with the PP's legal representative, Advocate Dali Mpofu, describing the process this morning as a violation of the Constitution. Newzroom Afrika's Athi Mtongana has been tracking the story. She joins us live now from the Houses of Parliament. Athi, give us more on what Dali Mpofu has been saying in that opening submission that he delivered a short time ago.
Well, Tembekile, he's actually still continuing to give his opening remarks before the Section 194 impeachment committee here in Parliament. Now, before they even began the hearings this morning, this is a historic move for Parliament. They are entering into uncharted waters. This is for the first time that Parliament now proceeds to actually look into the fitness of a head of a Chapter 9 institution, and so the chairperson of the committee, Richard Janji, went straight to defining what it is that they're there to do, defining the work of that committee. And then we also heard from Advocate Bauer, who's the evidence leader. She also legally outlined what it is that the committee is tasked to doing. Similarly to what the Constitutional and Legal Services from Parliament has been saying, she mentioned that this particular committee is not one that is actually going to look at whether the public protector is guilty or not, but their task is to essentially look at all the evidence that will be provided before this committee and to actually make findings and recommendations that they will be producing before the National Assembly. And so the legal counsel then for Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, Advocate Dali Mpofu, coming out immediately to say that this is not a removal committee and that they shouldn't treat it in that manner. And then he also argued that there is some sort of bias within this committee, making mention of some MPs, alleging that those MPs within the committee are already making pronunciations of guilt against the suspended public protector. But going back to what Advocate Bauer, the evidence leader of this particular committee, she made mention of the charges that have been leveled against the public protector, which I'd like us to actually listen to right now.
The first is that the public protector is guilty of misconduct in an investigation and report into allegations of failure by the South African government to implement the CX report and to recover public funds from Absa Bank. For ease of reference, we will refer to it as the CX matter. The allegations relate to the dismissive, high-handed, biased, well, I'm going to say, quote, let me repeat this. The allegations relate to the, quote, dismissive, high-handed, biased, and procedurally irrational and unfair process, unquote, in the conduct of the investigation, including that she met with the presidency and the state security agency secretly, that she broadened the scope of the investigation without notice and explanation, that she altered the remedial action on the instruction and or advice of the presidency and or the state security agency, that she failed to give affected persons notice and opportunity to comment on the proposed remedial action,
Advocate Bauer there reading some of the charges, which also include the work that the public protector did in relation to the Frede Dairy Farm matter. So some of those charges will essentially be what then forms the work of this particular committee. They'll also be calling witnesses. Some of them will be ordinary members of the public who are asked to submit some of the evidence that they feel should be part of this inquiry against the public protector. But then going back to the legal counsel for the public protector, Advocate Dali Mpofu, also alleging that particular committee is biased in the sense that there are MPs who are already making pronouncements of guilt. You'll recall that even the Speaker of the National Assembly, Nosiviwe Ngakula, wrote a letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa informing him that the committee would then continue with its work. So Advocate Dali Mpofu says it is at the back of some of these events happening that led to President Cyril Ramaphosa then suspending Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Busisiwe Mkhwebane. So these are just some of the arguments that Dali Mpofu is bringing before the committee. These are just his opening remarks before the MPs actually look into the evidence, because what they'll be doing is essentially looking at the evidence that has been brought forward and that has been collected. You will recall that even the public protector, before going to court, had not been allowed to bring legal representation, and so some of the outcomes from the Western Cape High Court have resulted to Advocate Dali Mpofu actually being part of Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's legal team, in that he's now going to be fully representing her within the process that is going to be taking place in the next few days. So tomorrow we're expecting one of the first witnesses to be brought forward. And again, just to reiterate what the evidence leader said, saying that members of the public were allowed to submit public comments, and some of them will be called as witnesses, and some witnesses will actually be subpoenaed to actually come and give their evidence before the committee.
Athi Mtongana, thank you very much for that update from Parliament, where it's the first day of the impeachment process against former Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane, her legal representative, that's Advocate Dali Mpofu, currently making a submission.